Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to episode 29 of the Making the Cut podcast. I'm Chris Hill with my co-host, Sean Winter. Today we have something a little bit different for you, a best of sorts for 2017, where Sean and I will be sharing some of our lessons we've learned and our favorite piece of advice from the incredible guests we've had in the first year. But before jumping in, we do want to thank you for joining us. Whether this is your first episode or you've tuned in since the beginning, it's been an exciting year, and I hope you've gained as many insights from our guests as we have. Sean, it's been a blast, man.
Yeah, Chris, it's been an incredible year connecting with some of these people. You know, I look back over the past 5 years, and I think about 50% of the podcast guests that we've had, I actually have read their books or read multiple books of theirs. So for me, I was like a kid in a candy store being able to talk with some of these people that I consider mentors from afar. So it's been, like I said, an incredible year. I've had a lot of takeaways. I hope some of the people that are connected with us in this podcast have had takeaways. So what we're going to do for anybody listening is that I've got 5 points that were some of my most profound takeaways. Chris has 5 points. We're going to have a conversation about those, and hopefully they inspire you as we wrap up 2017 and go into 2018.
Sean, it was damn near impossible to come up with just 5 because, like you said, these have all been mentors of mine as well, some from near, some from afar, but it's been a really, I almost want to say, selfish journey because I've had the opportunity to connect with all these people as of you and really get to ask the questions that I've always wanted to ask. So why don't you take it away with number 1, buddy? What do you say?
I'd love to, Chris. And by the way, these are not in a linear order, so these aren't going to build upon themselves or anything like that. These are just takeaways, essentially. So I think I'll start number 1 with Scott Stratton. He was a funny guy to talk with, and if anybody had the opportunity to watch some of his TED Talks or his keynote speeches, I would encourage you to do that. He's so brilliant, but funny at the same time. You know, something that we talked about with Scott Stratton was growing slowly to ensure you have processes and systems in place so that you're not dropping the ball in any area from a service standpoint. You know, I can attest to this, that when I started Entrepreneurial Chef, I wanted nothing more than have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to come to the site, to read the magazine, to, once Chris, you and I connected, to listen to the podcast and all these things. But the reality is that in the very beginning, I wouldn't have had the ability to serve those individuals. Like, even just down from a technology standpoint, the systems would have crashed. The website would have crashed. I didn't even have the higher hosting package to be able to handle that amount of traffic. So all of a sudden, if people would have come, they would have seen a broken website, and that would have been their introduction to Entrepreneurial Chef. And how terrible would that have been? And so in real terms, for any individuals that have a business that they want to start or that they've just started, imagine right now if you had 10 times the customers or 100 times the customers, that dream state. You might not be able to handle it if you're small right now. You don't have the people, the systems, the process in place. So it was a big mindset shift for me. And I think it's important for other people to understand that it's okay to start small, to grow small, or to start small and to grow from there, because you want to have the ability to serve people exceptionally on a smaller scale and grow from there, so that exceptional service then grows with you, versus finding yourself serving a large group from a mediocrity standpoint.
Yes, sir. Well, that actually really dovetails nicely into my first one, which is actually quite linear with that. Episode 25, John Rivers of Four Rivers Smokehouse talks about expanding. And one of the things he says is, find me your replacement. So make sure that you're mentoring and training the people up below you so that as you are expanding and growing, you have people that can serve the needs of your customers when you have worked your way up the ranks. But also, which I think is really specific and dials in what you're just speaking of, is when they were expanding, he had a conversation with Dan Cathy of Chick-fil-A, and he was asking for advice as they were growing to multiple stores, and they had just opened, kind of like what you're talking about, with the magazine. And Dan Cathy, looked at him and said, John, the problems you're going to have when you have 10 stores or 20 or 50 or whatever it is, those are completely different than the problems you have now. So focus on the problems that you have now and taking care of the customers you have now. And then you'll be able to better handle those problems and challenges you have when you do get to 10 or 20 or 50 stores.
Yeah, I think anybody that institutes that level of succession planning that John Rivers does into their business, it's just a brilliant way to operate, because that just feeds into a positive culture, all the way down to just using his same verbiage in that same process where you hold a meeting with some of the people that work for you and you ask them to find a replacement, and you make sure that it's a standard process, whether it's every quarter or twice a year, whatever it's going to be. I think it's a brilliant way to operate. And I would submit that you would see a massive change in your employees, in their level of engagement, if you do something like that. And so, Chris, the second one I'm going to go with, it was from Dory Clark. She was the author of Entrepreneurial You and Stand Out. And she talked about ideas and execution. And this hit home with me because I remember when I had any type of entrepreneurial idea, I would keep it close to the vest because I was in fear that people were going to take my idea or steal my idea. And the reality is that typically is not going to happen. Someone that you talk to doesn't care so much about that idea in relation to how much you care about it that they're going to want to take it and roll with it, and then even put in all of the time and energy and effort and money to then bring that to life. The other thing about sharing the idea and not keeping it close to the vest is that you're going to get feedback from people, and you need that feedback to then pivot and course correct. I think one of the biggest takeaways from her in that conversation in relation to this is that you don't want to build something in isolation. If you just build something in isolation, you could spend all this time, energy, effort, money, bring it to market, and all of a sudden it flops. And if you would have just shared it with people along the way, got feedback, got input, you could have made some course corrections that would have had a successful launch. So I think that was something that I took away, and I hope people take away, that don't build something in isolation. Ideas are a dime a dozen. A lot of people aren't going to steal it because it takes a whole lot of effort to execute them.
And also, Sean, as you are executing and bringing that idea to life, and I know this is the case with you with Entrepreneurial Chef, you're going to have iterations, and it's not going to be exactly, Entrepreneurial Chef, is it exactly how you had envisioned it on day one?
No, absolutely not. I've actually made major design changes like 7 times all throughout in like 18 months.
You might have hit me up once or twice about some of those too, right?
So true. That was even yesterday.
But so Dory's great. I believe she was on episode 22. Definitely check her out in her books. Number 2 for me, I think would be episode number 7 with Steve Sisler. If you don't remember, Sean, he psychoanalyzed me of sorts.
That was a brutal episode.
Yeah, that one went pretty long too, but it was definitely fascinating. He talked a lot about us as human beings, and he basically understands people and goes into companies and helps them to get out of their own way as people. One of the things he talked about was how people don't really change, and how it's really important for us to understand how somebody else operates and be able to communicate in a way that they will understand. I think whether it's, in your business or even like in your relationship, I think a lot of us, it's way easier to communicate in the way that is comfortable for us. Even there's books like the 4 Love Languages, where we're supposed to understand the way that the other person, loves, so to speak, so that we can better love them the way they need to be loved. I think it's the same thing with in business. We need to really get clear on who we are so that we can be effective for the people around us as leaders and as just people in their lives.
Yeah, solid point, Chris, and big takeaway even for myself. That episode, that was a brutal one. He nailed you and I without even knowing us, which was it was a little uncomfortable, I'm not going to lie, a little uncomfortable. So number 3 for me was Bjork Ostrom. We talked to him. He was the founder along with his wife, Lindsay Ostrom, of Pinch of Yum. It's a food blog, and they've been very transparent about growing it and turning a food blog into a business. So he's very transparent about the money that they've made, how they've been able to make it, how they've monetized. And then also they have this course where they help other people create a food blog. So with him, there was two things that really stood out. Number one, he talked about building a bridge instead of just burning the boats. So for anybody that wants to embark on an entrepreneurial venture, he contends that if you start on the side and you grow it to the point where it exceeds the income that you're getting from your job, and then you make the switch, and again, you kind of have this bridge that you build to where you can go back and forth, he contends that that's the better way to do it. There are some people that have the philosophy, including myself, that say you should burn the boats. And I think it comes down to your personality. I know for me, it's hard for me to do two things at 100%. And so I'm that type that has to burn the boats. But as I've kind of grown and, matured, if you will, I've been able to leverage energies in a different way. So I think I would say that building a bridge and doing something on the side and growing it to the point to where you're not in a frantic situation is definitely a smart thing to do. Another thing that he talked about was landing and expanding in relation to building a business and first establishing yourself in a niche, and then from there doing an outward spiral. I think some people, they look at maybe individuals that have entrepreneurial ventures or business owners, and they see that, we'll take John Rivers, for instance. He's got 15 something stores. He's got his barbecue sauce in the grocery store. He's got food service distribution now that he just launched in this last year. He has this big empire, but it's taken him starting out with an 1,100 square foot commissary kitchen that turned into a restaurant. He wasn't even intending to build a restaurant, and then doing a second one and a third one and a fourth one, and then bottling up his barbecue sauce. He started first with this very specific niche, and that was beef brisket in the Southeast, in Florida, something that a lot of people were not doing or at all. And he then started going outward. So the takeaway for me was finding that niche, dominating that niche in whatever entrepreneurial venture, and then starting to, create that outward spiral.
Well, and that's really, I think, kind of similar to what Mark Schaefer was saying in the last episode we had, episode 28, talking about, being known, and what he alluded to, really the very first thing you need to get clear on if you want to be known for anything, whatever that is what is it that you want to stand for, and being very specific there. And once you are, then you can kind of, like you said, spiral out from there. For me, number 3, I think, would be, another great conversation. This was, I think, a very helpful one for a lot of our audience. Episode number 9 with Jay Baer. He talks, a lot. Read the book most recently, Hug Your Haters. Talking about how to respond to Yelp reviews and online reviews and things of that nature. But he talks really about why it's better to create loyal, satisfied customers versus always having to go out and find new customers. He makes an example of how he went to a restaurant. I believe he was in New Mexico somewhere, and the chef came out and was talking about the different products they had, what they were using, how they came up with this dish, and how he had really felt like this chef cared about, not only the product, but about his experience there. And it's funny because, I've always tried to do the same thing, in the restaurant myself. And it's amazing to see the types of, raving fans, almost to the point of lunacy, that you can have following what you're doing. If you care about them first, then having to find that new customer becomes a lot easier because they're evangelists for you.
Yeah, I think a fundamental law in business is your customer acquisition cost is always lower for repeat customers than trying to get new customers. And that's essentially the essence of what he was preaching on that episode, is that put your all into the customers that you have so that you have those repeat customers over and over. I mean, your customer acquisition cost then just goes way down when you do it. I love that one. Number 4 for me, I'm going to say it was Aaron Walker, which was a super inspiring person to talk to, his story and his evolution. He became successful at a very young age, and he did so because he instituted something that there's been a lot of studies on, and that was he delayed gratification. He did not give in to instant gratification. And I think our society today, it's so easy to give in to instant gratification. We are very impatient people as a society, I believe. We get frustrated when a web page doesn't load in under 5 seconds, when I still remember dial-up when that came out. And like, you would literally plug it in and you would go do something else as it was you trying to connect. So it's very interesting to see where our society has gone, and that he was talking about the reason why he's successful is because when he was younger, he didn't give in or didn't really have a lot of that instant gratification around him. It was delayed gratification. There's even Chris, that marshmallow test with children. For anybody that doesn't know about that psychological test, that children, they said that they would give them 1 marshmallow instantaneously or 2 marshmallows if they could wait and not eat that single marshmallow. And the kids that waited, they actually followed them through life, and they found out that the ones that delayed gratification were more successful in whatever measures that they had in relation to the kids that gave in to that instant gratification and took that single marshmallow. It's very interesting, and I think that that's a massive, massive takeaway, not only for me, but I hope for other people, is that if you have the discipline to delay that gratification, you don't give in to certain things, certain temptations now, you can be 10 times more successful later on.
And I think part of that too, Sean, is actually reminds me of episode 14 with Stephen Kellogg, my favorite singer-songwriter of all time. He talks about this idea of the grass is always greener, and how we think it always is. But then, we get that new job or new house, new car, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever it is, and thinking that's going to make all our problems go away. But then we just have a new set of problems. And every new job has with it, whether you're moving up the ranks or down, has with it its own set of challenges. Even like we see all these super celebrities with that celebrityhood becomes a cost. Maybe it's their personal life doesn't have as much privacy as they'd like. Whatever it might be, all of these challenges pop up. Wherever it is we are with what we're trying to do with our life. So I think part of it, which Aaron does such a good job describing, is having that really solid perspective and knowing that, hey, I'm here right now. Let me do the best I can and realize that I'm going to get to where I want to go down the road, but let me enjoy and appreciate what I have right now. Number 4 for me, I think would be, and then we're getting down to the wire here, Sean, would be Simon Sinek. And hearing him, first of all, just connecting with Simon was incredible. I think the reason why I do the work I do is because I first watched his TED Talk, Start With Why, and then read his book by the same name. And he's an incredible guy. It was awesome hearing him talk about, Start With Why, but also leadership. And for me, I think really what I've applied most to my life and the work that I've done over the last year is the point he made, which is really what it means to be a leader. And the one thing they all have in common is courage. We all say, leaders have a vision, or leaders take care of their teams, or, leaders are selfless. At the end of the day, leaders have courage, because if you have courage, then you can do all those other things. You're putting other people in front of you because you understand, the long terms, and making the hard decisions, which in our talking with him, he said the hard decision isn't whether or not you have to, lay people off. That's an easy decision. The hard decisions are, how do I handle this conversation with this person who's having a tough day or having a real challenge? So having courage, it's really easy to say, but I think the reason why there's so few really great leaders out there is because it's really hard to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it was Tim Ferriss that said that your success is predicated upon the number of uncomfortable conversations you can have in your life. And I think that's 100% true in a leadership position. You can't run away from uncomfortable conversations. You have to have them. You have to talk with your employees. The instant that something pops up, you just can't be afraid to do that. In a lot of ways, that does take courage. So number 5 for me, Chris, this wasn't from any particular person, but this was just a massive takeaway for me, and I hope it resonates with people, is that you have to be okay with where you are right now with things that you've accomplished, even though you may have goals that you're trying to achieve in the future. For me, I always set big goals for myself, and it's like a never-ending circle where I can look back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and pinpoint these big goals that I had at any moment in time. But as soon as I approach these big goals and as soon as I'm starting to accomplish them, essentially, another one just pops up. And so I've realized at this stage in my life that I'm always going after something, always going after this big goal, but I'm not spending enough time appreciating the goals that I've accomplished or being okay in the present and living in this present moment with satisfaction or gratitude. And I don't want to come across in this Zen way, but I think it's just so important to be able to be in this present moment and be satisfied and be comfortable with what you've done still, even if you have these big goals that you're going after. But I think by having that mindset, you operate so much more effectively and efficiently, as opposed to being frantically operating to get to this goal, because there's always going to be something in front of you that you want to accomplish. So I'm going to end with 2017 and roll into 2018, just knowing that I've accomplished some great things. I'm 100% okay with who I am today because of the things that I've done, and I'm looking toward the future, and I'm going to accomplish more goals. But again, I am in this present moment and appreciative for all the opportunities and the things that I've been able to accomplish essentially up to this point. I think that was a big one for me that I'm going to end the year with.
That's a really great one, and I think it's really easy to look at the world we live in, social media, where everybody's putting out their best self, their perfectly manicured photos on Instagram and their best life events on Facebook, but we don't really see the challenges. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that, hey, we all have challenges, and we're all works in progress, and knowing that, hey, where I am right now is good enough, and what I've accomplished so far is good enough. Along the same lines, I'm not giving my number 5 yet, but I'm going to keep dovetailing yours. But in talking with Mark Schaefer, again, our most recent episode, one thing that really I could have helped to have heard that he said towards the end of the conversation is, I think you asked him, how do you know when to keep going and versus when to stop? And he said, if you're getting some of these intangible metrics, people are reaching out to you. If people are saying, oh, I love your food, I love your message, I love what you're doing. If you're getting those types of things, you have to keep going. And I think for me, I was getting those things, but a lot of times for me, that didn't turn to revenue, in the early days. So it was really challenging. I said, is this worth it or not? And having heard something like that would have been really helpful for me. I'm sure a lot of people listening as well. Number 5, and Sean, you'll probably make fun of me here, but I've mentioned this next guest, and if not every, at least half of our episodes would be Seth Godin. One of the books that we talked about in the conversation I had with him up at his office was Linchpin. And the original name for the book Linchpin was The Chef, the Cook, and the Bottle Washer, which is ironic because that's obviously a lot of our guests listening. And he says, a bottle washer has a pretty crap job. They're told what to do. A cook has, a less crap job, but they still don't have any creative control, and they're essentially told this is what you're supposed to do. And then finally you work your way up, and then you become a chef. And a chef has control. They have the creative control. They have the liberty to make decisions. But with that comes responsibility. And if you're listening, I assume you're either a chef or want to be a quote unquote chef in whatever it is that you're doing with your life. And stepping out and trying things that aren't going to necessarily work all the time and contributing in the best way you know how is really what is asked of you if you decide to become that chef in whatever it is you do. So for me, Seth has been a huge influence, and just trying things and giving things a shot and forging your own path is part of really what makes anyone, I think, successful.
I love it, Chris. And I can attest that you are the number one fan for Seth Godin. I think you're the one that started SethGodinFans.com.
You bet, man. I merged two photos of one of him, one of me. We look great together.
They like that guy that keeps photoshopping himself into famous celebrity pictures.
Exactly, or does all that plastic surgery work to get themselves to look like Michael Jackson or whoever it is.
Yeah. So you're gonna shave your head and get glasses?
Yep, some yellow framed glasses. Absolutely,
I love it. Yeah,
got it.
Seth Godin is such a mastermind. I mean, anybody that hasn't read any of his books, I mean, goodness, from a marketing standpoint, he is just a genius.
Well, one of the ways that I start every single day is his blog email comes in every single morning around 5 a.m. I'm not up at 5 a.m., but when it does come in and I wake up, that's one of the first things I do is read. And it's usually, like you said, brief. It's usually a paragraph. And it's something insightful. And I encourage anyone listening to go out and just Google Seth's blog. And you'll find it. You can sign up. He sends it out every single morning. And it's always some interesting thoughts. But yeah, I know you were going to say, Sean, it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to 2018. I know we have some great guests, out of the gates.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a heck of a year. So much fun. I'm looking forward to another year. And for anybody that's listening and anybody that follows along with whether it's Chris and what he's doing, it's Entrepreneurial Chef, it's both. We truly from the top, bottom, left, right, all sides of the heart. Thank you so much for the support.
Absolutely. And what do you say we kind of wind things down appropriately with a quote from one of our former guests?
Yeah.
All righty. Well, one of the conversations we did not discuss, but I think left us both kind of in awe, was with Paul Barron, the founder, CEO of Foodable. And one quote of his that actually I've stumbled across on Twitter last night is this: nearing 2018, you can take your dreams and piss them away, or you can create a new reality and push all the doubters to the curb. It's time you have that talk with who's holding you back, especially if that's you. The road starts here and now. Dominate 2018. Well, Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure. And with this, we're signing off.